What would you do to achieve freedom? Are you willing to fight for it? And if so, how many retries are you willing to power through? Hey, this is Reaper Ren. I'd like to say that out of the many standout titles that I've played over the years, very few hit the same notes as Furi, a fantastic hybrid of hack and slash and bullet hell where you fight off a colorful array of bosses whose mark of quality put them in the same ballpark as games like, say, No More Heroes or Cuphead. In this game, your goal is to break out of an interstellar prison, with each section being protected by a different guard, acting as the game's bosses. The sky's the limit here, and these battles go above and beyond amongst the stars themselves. All of them have something unique to offer, and I'm going to be ranking them, from my least liked to my personal highlight of the game. With a roster filled with battles as unique as this, there is going to be some disagreement about which battle goes where, and if you happen to disagree, sound off in the comment section below. Also consider liking and subscribing if you're enjoying the video. And with all that said, let's get started. Every game has the lowest common denominator, an encounter that takes the title as the worst part of the game, the one that no one likes. And knowing my luck, there will be a defense force for it. To all the star enjoyers out there, this is your cue to write a lengthy argument in the comments about how this is actually one of the better boss fights in the game. For everyone else, I'm going to ask a reasonable question. What makes Furi fun? For me personally, I like the mix between fun as hell hacking and slashing alongside the bullet hell segments. The better boss fights do a mixture of the two, but if I can only emphasize one of those elements, the sword combat is mechanically superior. Guess which part of the combat the star doesn't use at all? Let's get the positives out of the way. The story beats prior to the battle are pretty compelling. After learning the true purpose of your character, you return to the mothership where you originated from. Through visual storytelling, you see that Ryder was one of a million identical warriors sent to take over local planets. Now, all you have to do is flip one switch to destroy the Earth. But something about your character has changed, and instead of snuffing out the planet, you fight for its denizens. A conqueror, face turning into a savior. This is a solid setup. Too bad about the fight though. The first phase has you start off the battle with bullet hell, similar to the ending of the other boss battles, with the notable move being the laser beams flying across the screen. Occasionally there's a slash from the laser shooting appendages, which you can parry, but never perfect parry. Yeah, I don't want this battle to go over too quickly now. Don't bother shooting the laser spewing bits, instead go for the hands in front. If you don't, the battle will be prolonged even more than it already is. As mentioned earlier, you don't do any hacking nor slashing in this battle, but to compensate, you get a slightly stronger beam attack from the flying suit you're wearing. It lacks proper feedback to convey how strong it is, so aside from possibly higher DPS, it doesn't feel like an upgrade. Anyhow, Phase 2 goes by quickly, mostly because there's more of an opening to the star's weak point. The line-colored laser waves are a tad annoying though. Phases 3 and 4 are just you knocking out the giant hands, which will defend themselves with indestructible laser balls, laser beams, or shockwaves. The last phase is the desperation attack, which is fitting since it's also used by other bosses, but it's pretty drawn out and kinda dull. If you can easily get overwhelmed by glowing balls, this part is obnoxious, but if you know what you're doing, the last chunk of Furi is a full-on bore. Maybe this boss is more clever than I'm giving it credit for. I mean, the general annoyances and lack of excitement could be an in-depth metaphor for how being a good person often relies on making personal sacrifices for the greater good. Maybe it is so mid that it's actually peak. Or, you know, Occam's razor, maybe the game makers wanted to make a full-on bullet hell for their final boss and drop the ball. The many, many laser balls. Is this a boss fight or a reminder not to skip out on leg day? As the penultimate boss fight in Furi, this is a tad underwhelming, but as an example of telling a story through gameplay, I think this battle has a small moment of brilliance. First of all, the walk leading up to this area has some fantastic music. That's fairly standard for Furi, but up to this point you've been slowly spoon-fed information on what kind of character you've been playing as throughout the game. The music alongside the icy cold environment low-key prepares you for something awful to happen in the near future. And then you run into someone who is way too young to be a prison guard. Like, a few of these fights push at my suspension of disbelief, like the strap, but the architects of this prison were so desperate that they enlisted someone who looks like they aren't even at the legal drinking age.
In America.
The battle, if I can call it that, is closer to a chase level where you run after the boss and dodge lasers. The running segment starts off pretty simple, with it requiring you to dodge the indestructible orbs in a wave pattern, to then dealing with cluster shots that can be shot down, and during the last running segment, you avoid laser beams. The individual segments where you directly fight the beat are relatively simple. You focus on dodging her laser attacks and shoot back. The one thing I noticed is that the battle paradoxically becomes easier between phases. The first phase has you avoid a wide-moving floor hazard, the second phase you just need to avoid shockwaves, and the last phase... well, after failing to eradicate Ryder with the biggest laser in game, you enter into a one-sided fight. Is it even fair to call this a fight? There's no big desperation attack at the end, unless you count the sound of desperation in her voice just begging you to quit. In the end, you stomp out a naive youth who was way in over their head. You broke free, but now you're left wondering if it was all worth it. Oh, and that achievement for killing the beat? That's just mean.
The old man coming up. There's more to him than meets the eye.
This has nothing to do with the boss fight, by the way. I just think Transformers are cool. Replaying a game means that the vague memories of your first playthrough are going to be compared to your current opinions, which are placed into sharper focus. In most cases, I gain a better appreciation for the subtleties that I missed on the first time around. In this case, I think the line is kind of average. Okay, I'll be fair and start off with the things that this boss has going for it. The visuals and the music are fantastic. The OST for Furi is already peak, but the segment of the game has a fantastic music for both the slow walk and the boss fight itself. There's a meditative vibe to it, which fits for a battle against an enlightened monk. The visuals of a Japanese satin garden is just plain gorgeous. Personally, I think this is one of the few areas that makes the best use of the game's art style. The main gimmick of the line is a battle against a boss that can manipulate time. Too bad that it's barely used throughout the fight. The first phase has you playing 3D Arkanoid, with bullets occasionally getting fired back at you and damaging waves to occasionally dodge. After dealing one whole point's worth of damage to the boss, you move on to phase 2, where you have to master the art of dodging, followed by more of what the first phase had. However, once you break down the colored block that he's been resting on top of, you actually get to fight the line and get the privilege of seeing that time manipulation gimmick. He fires a storm of bullets all over the area and then pauses time, freezing the bullets in place. This even affects your own laser pistol, which is a nice touch. The only way to get past this phase is to wait for an opening to strike. Things actually come alive in the third phase. It's functionally the same as the last one, but the bullet patterns get more interesting in the first half, and the extra clusters of bullets to dodge around makes for a more interesting second half. The last phase is just okay. The desperation attack has him summon 8 colored blocks to shoot down, with the screen getting filled with a countless number of projectiles, though most of them can be shot down with your laser pistol. While the bullet hell feels a tad underwhelming, the final hit being given after doing a parry is a nice touch. Hey, you know how in the last segment I mentioned how my opinions changed on this recent playthrough? Well, here's a second round of that. On my first playthrough, I absolutely hated the song. Her boss pattern and emphasis on far-range attacks made this battle in particular a nightmare to go through. It was the picturesque image of bringing a sword to a gunfight. In this playthrough, I took her down quite easily by finding what felt like an exploit. more on that later. A quick note of praise has to go to the alternate ending to the game that comes from going with the song's idea and staying with her in that one cell for the rest of your life. I mean, who wouldn't want to give up their freedom for a cute blonde? This fight, in contrast with a few before and after, is way more projectile based. However, unlike the line, the fight has a lot more going for it. This boss is designed after an angel, so her movement involves flying all over the arena and even over bottomless pits. Oh yeah, bottomless pits are in this battle. They were a thing in an earlier fight, but their inclusion is more pronounced here. You spend the majority of the fight shooting at the song, with her frenetic movement making for a more interesting experience. She'll occasionally charge at you to bring on the hurt, but I discovered that if you parry at the right time during her charge, you can effectively neuter this part of the boss fight. Phase 2 is more the same, but she gets more aggressive with a long-range laser beam going across the screen. Phase 3 goes into full-on bullet hell, with some of the more interesting patterns to dodge around, with the fact that, unlike earlier fights, there aren't any green bullets used for regaining health, adding to the tension. In the 4th and 5th phase, the fighting space gets expanded, but that's not going to help much. There's a gap that the player can fall into, and several of her attacks take up the majority of the space on that platform that she's on. In her final phase, the song summons those shield generators that the line used earlier in the game. Boo! But there are actually only 5 of them, and the bullet hell pattern is nowhere near as tedious to dodge, especially when you have to avoid the little bullets, the lasers, and the circular shield all at the same time. Props to the final bit where instead of shooting the boss, you have to navigate around her floor's lava-style hazard to deal the final blow with your sword. This is a solid boss fight, and a good example of how Furi can blend in bullet hell segments with sword-based combat seamlessly. The opening moments of a game are low-key the most important parts of the experience. I've had friends tell me they couldn't get into a given title because it didn't have an energetic opening and took too long to get to the interesting bits. The low attention spans found in small but vocally loud enough part of the audience isn't helping in this regard. With that said, Furi's opening is fantastic. You boot up the game, enter into a dark area that appears to be a prison cell, and watch as your character gets beaten until he loses consciousness from the first boss. All seems hopeless until a stranger shows up channeling the energy of Bunni, freeing you from your cell and telling you to cut down your tormentor. The character design for the Chain is rock solid, with an intimidating stature and the white Oni-inspired mask on his face. The battle itself is really good. He's armed with a bow staff that has deceptively long range and occasionally mixes things up with the clusters of bullets. That's all good, but we're in the beginning of the game. Where's the tutorial? Well, the first 3 phases of this boss fight are built around showing off the game's mechanics. The first phase is devoted to shooting and slashing, the second phase revolves around their charge variants, and the third phase is making use of the game's dodge ability and making use of those iframes. After that, the training wheels comes off, and you get to the real battle. The fourth phase has you running through all the same stuff as before, but without the hand-holding, and then the next few phases get crazy. That bow staff almost has as much range as a melee attack in Dark Souls, plus that last phase. The first desperation attack in the game, and it is a fantastic ending to this boss fight. It's a great way of getting your feet wet with the mechanics, and gives a nice taste of what the rest of Furi has to offer. That said, the fact that this is a tutorial battle is the only thing holding it back. The battle feels a little simple when the boss has to pull its punches, bar playing through the game again on Furier mode.
Get bent, you freaky fish guy. I am not a freaky fish guy.
We're hitting the middle part of the video, so that means I'm not going to get in trouble for calling something mid. More to the point, the character in the dead center of the ranking is pretty good, but falls short in greatness. In a vacuum, and especially compared to other video games, this battle is pretty great. Compared to the full roster in this game, the individual gimmicks didn't do it for me. Neither does the design. Seriously, this looks like an alt-universe version of Undyne if all her personality was beaten out of her. The quirk with this fight is that bullets also have a streak following them, so dodging isn't just a simple case of playing dodgeball. There's also a debuff that happens whenever you get hit, but I think the devs got cold feet by messing around with the player's vision, because the blur effect is barely noticeable. Basically, it's just the chain again, but for people who really like the color green. That said, the fight is pretty fun. I noticed the deep sea diver suit was incorporated into his fight, with him going underneath the gamer guy bathwater covering the arena. This happens even in close quarters fight, which gives the battle a different energy than the previous bosses. In the later phases of the fight, he breaks out the shadow clones to add even more shots to dodge around. He also breaks out the balls, but these are denser, so they can't be taken out with a single shot. It's a lot to keep track of, but it's a welcome challenge. The Desperation attack is the standard storm of bullets to shoot through, but you get the green waves to jump past. However, in the later parts, he throws up a bunch of green lines and then sends shockwaves for you to dodge around, putting your ability to reposition it to the final test. It feels odd calling this battle middling, but everything past this point, both design and battle-wise, is what I consider to be the high watermark of this game. I only realized that that last sentence was a pun. Damn it. Hey, you remember that little lamp thing from the Pixar logo? The real punchline is that someone, somewhere out there in the world is gonna look at this and then say, wood. For the second boss of the game, this battle is a nice change of pace. The chain was fairly straightforward. He had some physical attacks and occasionally shot bullets at you, with the only weird part being the length of his melee swings. This boss shoots lasers in a circular recreation of the maze from Pac-Man. The fight starts off pretty solid, with a Hannibal Lecter looking ass zipping around the battlefield firing projectiles at you. Some slow, some fast, and some you can't shoot through. 2 phases and 1 melee fight later where the strap aggressively nudges at you, she breaks her arms free and whips out of sight. Now you'll have to deal with bladed swipes in between all the laser beams. There's a nice sense of flow here, with the battle getting faster paced with every restraint the boss removes to get the extra edge to beat you into the ground. In the final stretch of the battle, she gets sick of all the restrictions and busts out from all the restraints, even going the extra mile and ditching the scythe to fight you barehanded. Trust me when I tell you that this isn't the disadvantage you think it is. The strap is scary fast now, and a nice little side effect of not swinging around a big weapon is that her animations for parry windows are slightly harder to read without the audio cue. There's also a mini stealth bit where you need to find a safe zone and hide in it, or else she'll rip your face off. That final Desperation attack is some top-notch stuff, taking all the bullets and dodging around a massive fuck-off laser, along with one last melee bit to finish things off. In the first phase, I'd consider this fight to be similar to the scale, but the radical shifts from phase 2 and onward bump this up for me. Also, the background lore is interesting. Apparently this boss was also a prisoner and was involuntarily recruited as an obstacle to keep the protagonist trapped here. It really makes you question who the good guys are. Wait a second. If this guy uses a sword and shield, why is he called the Hand? Well, that's a tad lazy. You know, for a game with wild and stylish designs, a discount Dovahkiin with a laser sword seems a bit basic. I mean, how tough can this guy be? He needs to hide behind a dinky little shield and... Yeah, it turns out that his strong defense complements his powerful offense. It's not enough to spam projectiles from the other side of the room. This guy keeps his window of vulnerability tight to the point of where even a sword swings will bounce off. Though don't get too confident, since a mindless melee swing can get you grabbed and beaten into the dirt. Barring his wave attack, which forces you to dodge around it, as opposed to through it, this guy is proof that a solid foundation can work well for a fun boss fight. After beating him down for 2 or more phases, he ditches the shield in phase 4, and that is not to your benefit. On one hand, he loses the protection against your pistol. On the other, he can still block the odd melee attack, and every sword swing the Hand throws out has a dramatically smaller windup. One of them instantly blasts across the battlefield. So pistoling him from across the map isn't a fully viable strategy because of his resilience and his ability to dart across the field to slash at you. It's a great change of pace, and it adds a visual theme for our Eastern Ronin-inspired protagonist, going up against a very Western medieval-inspired knight. I especially love the last phase. He puts you in between a rock and a hard place by playing the floor as lava with the edges of the arena, and forces you to dodge all of his attacks in a narrow spot. As for that desperation attack, you better be good at parrying. And man, what a great battle for the ages. Also, I don't want to be the CinemaSins type of dweeb that can't engage with art, but why did this guy bring his son to a prison cell? This feels like a cheap ploy to get me to feel emotional. Well, that's a name the salty DK Dan would approve of. Anyhow, you remember how to parry, right? Well, here's the final exam on that mechanic. Unlike the majority of the boss fights in the game, the Edge is primarily a close quarters melee fight. No distance, no extra room to breathe, little time to learn the ropes, or else
Come on, get back up.
you'll get knocked flat on your back. Unlike the other bosses, it doesn't really feel like you're in control of the pace. Hell, one attempt at a charge attack ended with me getting smacked dead. It's survivable, by the way. I just thought that dying to this part was really funny. It's tough, but the feeling of blocking his attacks in perfect timing and withering down his health is such a satisfying feeling after getting knocked down so many times. Furi's life system is put to good use here since it really works into the feeling of tug of war that these boss fights go for. The third phase is where a bunch of wild cards get thrown in. The first is that he switches to an ore to mess with your ability to read his strikes, then the battle switches to 2D. Sounds like a harmless change, but removing the Z-axis gives you less room to maneuver. Or technically the Y-axis, since you couldn't exactly jump before. Either way, I gotta say that the engine is pretty solid, since the camera changes perspective so drastically, and yet it still feels natural to move from side to side. This also is a testament to how solid the foundation of the combat engine is, cause I was able to avoid taking damage consistently despite the change in perspective. Similar to the hand, his desperation attack is mostly melee strikes mixed up with a wave attack, and just like the rest of that fight, you look for an opening to strike him down. That's the boss. Simple and uncompromising till the bitter end. If there's anything to take away from this battle, it's that excellence is formed from habit, so stay focused, and keep trying. Yeah, I took that from the game over screen. It's going to be the most familiar thing you'll see if you fight this guy and suck at parrying. I played Furi on PC via Steam, and I'm pretty sure that's a common case for the majority of players who eventually find this video. Well, to all the Xbox fans, the game makers eventually ported this game to your platform of choice, and for reasons that escape me, this one cutscene for The Flame is a console exclusive. Why wasn't this included in the paid DLC? This is a DLC boss that canonically takes place between the Beat and the Star, acting as the penultimate boss fight of the game. And holy hell does it earn that position. A few lines of dialogue and the mechanical implants heavily imply that you were the one to mess this guy up. Now you're getting a rematch so he can get back at you for what you did, on top of stopping you from destroying the world. With this being a DLC boss fight, the fight itself is pretty challenging. The mixture of full-on bullet hell from the very beginning of the fight and fast-as-hell melee attacks makes for a jump-in challenge that's on par with bosses like The Edge. In fact, a few of his moves really channel the best parts of the moveset from all the other bosses, while still feeling original. It has the wide swinging attacks of the chain, the giant fuck-off lasers of the strap, the unconventional change in weaponry from the Edge, the brute strength and laser switch-ups like the hand, and the bit where he makes the floor damage you while firing projectiles like the song, the weird rings from the next century, and bullet clusters from, well, that one's a little hard to narrow down. Storms of bullets are found all over this game. And hey, unlike the actual repackage, this feels thematically appropriate, since it feels like the true penultimate boss fight before you get to make your final choice and deal with the consequences. Either becoming the monster that everyone thought you were, or powering through mid to save the world. Also, this boss fight has pansexual lasers of death. This specific part of the script was written around Pride Month. Honestly, a little fitting for a boss that's this extra. The final desperation attack switches gears and forces you back on the defensive as you avoid what feels like a non-stop flurry of attacks before getting a final slash in. If we ignore the story beats for a second, this has the makings of a damn good final boss fight, with only one battle in the game that I consider to be my personal favorite. Wait, I'm ranking all the boss fights, how can there be an honorable mention? Oh, right. Alright, show of hands, how many people even knew that this was a thing? No, seriously. Feel free to brag about it in the comment section, this video needs more engagement. Anyhow, this is a proof of concept that took the Chain, a boss fight that used 3D space well, and made it into a 2D Mega Man inspired battle. This is a pretty solid translation of Furi's fast-paced combat. It's not amazing, but at the same time, it's cool that we have a battle like this, and I hope this engine gets used for a more ambitious project in the future. It sucks that this remake is gonna cost money now, but I guess that's the struggle with running a business. Go figure. Thanks to the process of elimination, figuring out the top choice wasn't too difficult. Kudos to all the Furi enjoyers who called this one. Depending on who's watching, you might think that the top spot for the burst is a bit excessive, but hey, according to the lore, she's an 11 on a scale of 10. Actually... With most of these battles, there was a sense of a one-on-one fight. A battle of an unstoppable force versus a seemingly immovable object. The burst plays things differently. She's the hunter, and you're the hunted. That's not a metaphor. The first part requires you to find the boss while she's sniping you from across the arena. Even when you find her, the burst isn't a slouch, with her throwing a flurry of physical attacks and a cluster of bullets, plus a shockwave attack to zone you out, so don't get too comfortable. The next phase is more of the first, but with the addition of cover to mix things up. Yeah, the act of taking cover, the most dull part of the 7th gen of console shooters, was a positive addition for this boss fight. Go figure. Phase 3 is where things get more direct. After playing the most intense game of hide-and-seek, the close-up battle has her pull out her rifle to blast your ass into oblivion. Phase 4 mixes things up, where she channels the Predator energy by going invisible to slash you into ribbons. The most you get is the audio cue and the small flash before getting hit, so hope you got that timing down. Afterwards, you play Furi's equivalent to the floor's lava, and everything you just dealt with gets cranked up to 11, especially those rings meant to zone you out. In Phase 5, she's done running and forces you to stand up to her onslaught of basically everything she's been throwing at you so far. The final phase has her break out her desperation attack. It starts off pretty basic by this game's standards, but then she whips out the sniper rifle for one last MLG session, forcing you to frantically run to cover while dodging literally everything else on the screen. Then the second half has her throw out a massive flurry of attacks from a completely invisible target. Once you survive the onslaught, you get the finishing blow on this damn good boss fight. What I especially liked is the flow of the battle. As mentioned earlier, you start off as the hunted, only for the odds to swing in your favor and become the hunter. From prey to predator, from novice to master. For me, there's no better encapsulation of the game than this fight. But I'm interested to see the other perspectives. Comment your thoughts below, and I hope to see you in the next video. This is Reaper Ren, signing off.